Hey, you are listening to Cinema Rex. It is an Iranian film podcast, episode 22, Jafar Panahi's Offside. Farn, are you a sports fan?
For some sports and for some occasions.
What are the sports and occasions?
Soccer and the World Cup.
So you're a specific soccer during the World Cup fan. You're not a soccer during
Or
the
like
regular-
even like qualifiers, Asia Cup. Like it's like international games are the ones that I watch. I don't really care much for club games.
I'm guessing you're a big South Korea fan, and Japan are the two teams you root for, right?
Those are the two, yeah.
Okay, but obviously it's Iran. Do you root for Canada?
Yeah, I was rooting for Canada. Yeah, the last World Cup they didn't make it too far. I mean, they made it farther than they've ever made it.
Yeah.
But yeah, there aren't as many opportunities to root for Canada.
Making it farther than they've ever made it, including scoring a goal in the World Cup, which
Yeah.
they had never done before.
Yeah. And I also really like Ghana's team. I like Argentina. Like I have like different teams that I like.
I thought you were
Yeah.
joking.
No. I actually really like Ghana.
There's a lot of Iranians who like Germany for some reason. I don't. I guess I get a lot of Iranians like Germany for Western European countries. I think.
Yeah.
And I guess you're right. I think Argentina and Brazil. Those are the popular.
Yeah. I mean, they're the strongest teams.
Yeah, but I think there's also a huge diaspora of Iranians in Germany.
Yeah.
So people either have like their family grew up in Germany, or like someone in their family ended up rooting for Germany, so they ended up. Do you know that player Shoma?
No.
His first name is Durud Bar Shoma. Dustana Aziz.
Oh, I hate you. I hate you so much.
This is a Cinerex podcast where we talk all things soccer and sports. Well, today we're doing Offside. It's a film. It's the fifth film by Jafar Panahi. This is before his imprisonment, right? Yeah, it is before his imprisonment. It's before he was arrested the first time. It's actually a very popular film. It was one of the first Iranian films I'd sort of heard of reaching cultural milieu outside of Iranians. You know what I mean? Like I remember this playing in theaters in Toronto, not just at TIFF, but smaller theaters played Offside.
Oh,
My
interesting.
mom went with her friends.
Well, not where I lived, so I didn't know that.
Toronto had it. I think Carlton Cinemas had it.
That's dope.
Yeah, it was like kind of the first entry point to like seeing Iranian films get recognized outside of just the people I knew. Are you excited far now to do a breakdown on the Offside? On Offside, the Offside.
On the offside, yeah.
There's also another 2006 film called Offside, which made researching this annoying. I don't remember what it was. There's on IMDb. There's another movie called Offside that came out the same year.
Oh, I had never even heard of the other one.
By Martin Klemberg. Offside, 2006. British soccer champion arrives to Swedish sleepy town to save their soccer team.
Ugh. Sounds terrible.
Should we just go into plot summary?
Yeah, let's do it.
Classified by many reviewers as a non-documentary, this scripted story follows a group of women who attempt to sneak into the World Cup qualifying game between Iran and Bahrain in 2005. The story follows these 5 nameless women, all strangers to each other, who are quickly caught by the Islamic guards at the soccer match and forced into detainment as the game plays out just on the other side of the wall. The women try and negotiate the terms of their release as 4 frustrated but aloof Basiji soldiers scold them throughout the game. The film was shot in secrecy with amateur actors during the actual Iran-Bahrain game, and the events surrounding the game are entirely true. It has a 94 Rotten Tomato score and a 74 audience score. So Farhan, soccer fan that you are, I ask you, what did you think of Offside?
I love this movie. I have seen it. I had seen it before, but I didn't really remember it until like while I was watching, I was like sort of remembering things. Yeah, I think I really like movies where the soccer game is a stand-in for something else.
Mm-hmm.
And in this case, it was a stand-in for, I think, resistance, especially for that of women in Iran. Other Iranians as well, but like I think more specifically, the movie is about the resilience of women in the face of oppression in Iran. It was really refreshing to see. I don't like a lot of North American sports movies because they kind of all end up being the same thing. It all just ends up being Mighty Ducks. But this to me is like definitely up there with the best ones that I can think of. And I think part of it is because it's told from such an interesting POV.
Mm-hmm.
It's not shot on the field. Do you know what I mean? It's also not even shot from the sidelines of the field. it's shot from like the outskirts of the stadium. It's shot from like above the stadium. You're like on a bus and you like see the game through a window. Like it presents the game itself in such an interesting and unique way that it forces you to really get intimate with the characters because everything is seen through their lens. And I find that really fascinating. And to cap off the film the way that they did was very satisfying. So, big fan.
Yeah, Panahi talks about the real metaphor of the title offside. Because do you know the offside rule in soccer? That your attacking player can't go past the defense to make a play. So if your last player forward who's attacking doesn't have the ball, he can't just run ahead the last defenseman. He has to be the last player moving forward has to carry the ball across him. In hockey, it's a standard line, but in soccer, it's the last player is the line. So he was saying that metaphor to him resonated as like the law doesn't allow people in society of Iran to move forward past a certain point. So that if you do that, if you cross that line without permission, you've committed an offense. And these women are, in a sense, are now like trapped in a jail because they're trying to cross a line that is literally not allowed for them to be crossed, which they knew would be an offense. So there's an offside sort of parallel there between the actual rules of the game and the actions of the girls it's fascinating. Another thing I like about the movie is it really, quite early on, I thought it felt like a heist, like almost like gave me Ocean's 11's feel.
Yeah.
Especially when she's the first girl is in a line to go in and she sees past the line, the Basiji guys are going to be checking everyone's hat. They like one guy like looks under a hat, and because she's a young girl, a woman, she's if that hat's lifted, it's gonna expose her long hair and she's gonna become exposed. She's suddenly like there's like this panic tension building up of her, like what is she gonna do and how is she gonna handle this situation? It gave me like Ocean's 11 vibes. They're trying to break into a casino or break into a bank, you know?
Yeah. Well, and there's different types of soldiers there, right? Like there was, I think, one line of Basiji like outside the stadium, but we don't really see them. We like kind of see them at a distance, and they like walk past them at one point. And then there's the guards at the stadium, like the security guards, and then the soldiers. And the soldiers are the ones that we follow for the majority of the movie. Of the like principal cast, there's a couple soldiers who are there because they're like conscripted for their mandatory service.
So those soldiers aren't Basiji, right?
My understanding is those ones are not Basiji.
Okay.
That's my understanding. I could be wrong.
Yeah.
But I'm pretty sure.
Okay. I'm not sure.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure that like everything that I've been reading online, at least the resources available to me, because I had that question, is that the main soldiers that are guarding the women, those ones are soldiers. But then the guy who, for example, their boss, I'm pretty sure their boss is like high ranking in IRGC.
Yeah.
And that's why like even the soldiers are like, look, even if we wanted to help you, we can't. We're going to get in trouble, all this stuff. It's because they're just conscripted. Like they're just doing their military duty.
Yeah. I mean, there's a problem. You probably make a good case for what you're saying, because if you look at the IMDb, none of the characters have names. And the soldiers or Basiji or whatever they are, they're like literally credited as soldier from Mashhad, soldier from Tehran, soldier from Azerbaijan. So it's like that's how they're identified in this film, as their credits. And then to circle around back to our 6 main young women, they're credited as first girl, which is the first girl we see in the film on the bus. Soccer girl, which is the one I think that she claims to play competitively.
Yeah.
There's smoking girl who shows up second last. There's young girl who I believe is the one who's crying at the beginning.
I thought
there's girl with chador.
That's first girl,
not according to IMDb. Then there's girl with chador. She first is wearing a lot more like face paint and stuff, and later on puts the chador on. And then girl disguised as soldier. Those are the 6 girls. First girl, soccer girl, smoking girl, young girl, girl with chador, girl disguised as soldier. And a really like eclectic, interesting group of young women. They're very, I feel like you can get, Panahi does a really good job of writing these characters, in my opinion. I think they're like really, you kind of instantly, even from the way they first present themselves, the way they're first reacting to being detained says a lot about each character. Like you have the young girl who's crying and mostly silent throughout a large portion of the film, but then like smoking girl shows up and she just like steals the scene. She's so different from the rest of them.
Her and the soldier girl, or they're like when she comes up and they're like, "Why'd you bring me this other soldier?" And he's like, "No, this is a girl." He's like, "What? Why are you dressed like a soldier?" And then she salutes him and she's like, "Reporting for duty."
Yeah. Or the smoking girl, when she shows up, the guy's like, "Wait, is this a guy or girl?" They didn't know either, and he's like, "Whichever you prefer."
Yeah, whichever you prefer.
Yeah, she's a great character. But we start off also with the father. The very first thing we see is a man in a car. He's looking for his daughter. There's not much of like a thing, but I just thought it was interesting that there's this sort of semi-through line of this father looking for his daughter that's in the crowd somewhere. And he gets into the bus with the fans where we kind of first meet the first girl. When you're reintroduced to the father later on in the story and none of those 6 girls are his girl or his daughter, it sort of becomes this like symbol that it isn't just these 5 or 6. There's probably like 5 or 10% of the crowd are these girls that have snuck in. You know what I mean? It just gives a sense
5 or 10 that's a massive number.
That is, but it's just not. It's not as simple as
there's like 100,000 people in that stadium.
Yeah, it's not 10, but it could be like 1%.
Maybe
it could be a lot more than we're seeing ever.
Yeah, for sure.
One of the first major things I thought was interesting to take away from was the man selling tickets and merch. At first, he refuses to sell the first girl a ticket.
Yeah.
Because he instantly knows she's a young girl.
Yeah, he doesn't want to be implicated.
And he's trying to make it almost seem like, oh, it's for your own safety too, whatever. But then the commentary about how at the end of the fact, he'll just jack up the price and charge her more. And then charge her for, well, if you're going to buy a ticket, you have to buy a poster too. And it's like, that's another 500 Toman for the poster.
Yeah, because if he was just trying to get her out of there, then he would have just been like, here's your ticket now, get away from me.
Yeah, he would have just also been like, I can't do this, it's for your own safety or whatever. But the moment he sees there's he just wants the monetary risk to be worth it.
Yeah.
He's still willing to make a woman's hard process even harder if he can gain something from it.
Yeah.
Like, this guy's not an ally to the process. He ended up getting his little taste in terms of like financial reward for it.
Yeah.
And then whatever, they let the woman off to her thing. And it's just really funny that he's not part of the system. He's not like part of the authorities, but he's just like a little bit of a corrupted person on the side who's going to get his. He's going to get his out of the situation in the end.
Hey, you watched this movie when it came out. As you were watching it, were you getting like, was it refreshing your memory or like not at all?
It wasn't, except the one thing I thought really threw me off was I forgot how early they get caught. I thought it happens much later in the film.
Yeah, I thought so too.
Yeah, but the first girl gets caught quite early on. Like, essentially the second she steps in.
Yeah, I think in my brain, because there's a scene where the soccer girl escapes from the bathroom.
Yeah.
Because she's like, oh, I have to go to the bathroom. And they're like, there's no women's bathroom here. And it's like, well, what do you want me to do? Like, pee all over myself? And then they're like, okay, fine. Like, take her, make sure you bring her back, all this stuff. And then he takes her to the bathroom and he tries to like, this one soldier tries to keep all the other men out. And in the kerfuffle of trying to stop other guys from using the bathroom, she escapes. And then he runs into the stadium looking for her.
Mm-hmm.
First of all, that shot when he goes into the stadium and it pushes in and then it reveals the entire like game and the stadium. That was awesome.
Yeah, it was a great shot.
Like the way that, the sound design, the reveal. Yeah, it was beautiful. I think in my head, I had moved that up to the beginning of the movie.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think the way that I remembered it is like, oh, I think they get in and then they're like, they go into the stadium and then someone comes looking for them. And I forgot. What do you think of that moment?
The shot? Yeah, it's wonderful. And it's only one of 3 moments that were crucial to Panahi to make sure he captured on film. He says in an interview that I was going to get this behind the scenes in trivia, but
we can get to it then.
Okay, sure.
I think part of it was just like seeing 100,000 Iranians all in one place cheering and celebrating and like happy despite what's going on outside of those walls. And like, and you just see this shot of this one soldier just like scared and overwhelmed and like surrounded by 100,000 Iranians. I thought the imagery of that was powerful.
Yeah, it is an important distinction to mention. That shot is through the eyes of the Basiji or the soldier.
Yeah.
Whatever he is. I also just rewinding a bit. I really like the scene when the soldier is is walking with the young woman, the first woman, towards the place where they can detain her, and he asks to borrow his cell phone so he can call his girlfriend. And then she calls back saying like, "Who is that girl you're with?" He's like, "I swear it's not. She's gonna go to jail. I swear it's not." And It's just for a split second, there's this minor power imbalance because now he's like getting chastised by his own girlfriend about who's this girl whose phone are you using?
Yeah.
I really like the scene where there's one moment when the soldier's being ordered to commentate the game for the rest of them.
Yeah.
It's also really interesting and worth discussing. He writes these soldiers with a lot more empathy than I've seen in any other movie.
Yeah.
What do you think that's about?
I think that's another thing that makes me think that they're conscripts for the military and not IRGC is because even like Iranians typically have a lot more sympathy for soldiers. Like even a lot of times when you're seeing protests in Iran and protesters they have chants where they're like, join us, join us, join us. Usually they're not talking to the IRGC, they're talking to the soldiers. Because the soldiers are conscripts, right? So like even the head soldier here, he's a farmer. You know what I mean? Like he keeps talking about how he just wants to finish his military service. He wants everything to go smooth so he can go back home. His 2 years is almost up. He just wants to go back home to his like cow and his sheep and like back to his life on the farm.
Yeah.
He hates everything about Tehran. He just wants to get away and go back to his life.
Yeah.
And I think that in Iran, at least from conversations that I've had with friends, people typically have a lot of sympathy towards the conscripts, towards the army,
Right.
as opposed to the IRGC. And I think that's also why there's always a distinction made and why people are like, no, IRGC, they're the terrorist organization. They need to be labeled as such. But that same distinction is not made for the military.
That's a good point.
I also think that that's why, I mean, obviously tensions are high right now with Iran and Israel. I think just practically speaking, for a lot of the Iranians outside of Iran who are like, oh, a war with Iran would be good for Iran, et cetera, et cetera. First of all, you would have a lot of civilian casualties, like hundreds of thousands, if not millions. The second thing that I want to point out is that the IRGC isn't who's going to fight that war. They're going to conscript like every man in Iran to fight the war. And now when you're having these men dying, again, people still have sympathy for conscripts because those are just Iranian people. They're like, like if you and I lived in Iran for 2 years of our lives, we would be forced to go serve in the military. You know what I mean?
Right, yeah. There's an interesting aspect too about the fact that the guys say, he just lays it out in front of them. Like the reason women can't attend these games is because men are behaving badly. Men are going to be swearing. Men are going to be using foul language and men can't control themselves is like one of the things they say. And I just think there's like a very interesting distinction between like extreme Islamic rule of like these women are being censored or they're putting hijabs on their head imposed by the government because in their eyes, the men cannot control themselves around these women. It's the man's bad behavior that forces the women to be censored. You know, it's like, well, we must protect. I mean, again, this is not what it is, but this is like in their twisted way of things. Like we must protect the sanctity of women because men cannot be controlled and men are wild dogs. And the soldier just lays it out for him. It's like, she's like, you know, the smoking girl asks like, so why can't I go out there? Explain it to me. And he's like, well, men are swearing. Men are using foul language. Men are behaving erratically. At no point do they talk about it's like the women's actions.
And she's like, oh, so it's to protect the women. He's like, yeah. And she's like, okay, so what about
Japan?
Yeah. She's like, what about when Japan was playing here? Japanese girls were allowed in the stadium.
Yeah.
And then he's like, oh, well, they're Japanese. They don't understand our swear words. And she's like, okay, so the Japanese women can sit when they come, but I can't. And then he said, well, yeah. But also, he's like, women can't sit next to men. And she's like, they do that in theaters. He's like, no, they don't.
Wait.
Yeah.
Wait, well, there's one thing in distinction. She says to him, so Japanese women can, but I can. He goes, yes. He goes, so it's my Iranianness that prevents me from watching the game, not my woman status.
Yeah.
Which I think is very important because they're having hypocrisy about Japanese women. They can, but Iranian women can't. So it's not the woman part of it. She's like, it's my Iranianness you have a problem with.
Yeah.
Which is an interesting thing. And then, then they talk about how come in Tabriz, they're in theaters you can sit and it's in the dark.
Yeah.
I love how some of these women don't give a shit too. Some of the women are like, one of the youngest girl is like crying, but the few, like the soldier for the most part, the one who's disguised, but the smoking girl, it's like she's not at all threatened by them. She's constantly lashing out at the soldiers. She doesn't take any shit from them. She's not intimidated by being arrested. She's probably been arrested many times before. Like this is so.
Well, and that's what they say too. They're like, oh, we're taking everyone to headquarters, but you're going to, or we're taking everyone to the station, but you're going to headquarters because this isn't your first offense. You've done stuff like this a bunch of times.
The woman in the soldier outfit was straight up sitting in like the chief's seat at the theater.
And,
like, she was not intimidated.
Not just sitting at the chief's field side seat or whatever. Like she was in the box.
Yeah.
She also had her feet up on his desk.
Yeah. That's really great. The transformation scene. The father shows up and he's looking for his daughter, but then he finds the daughter's friend instead, who had gone to the game with her. And she's embarrassed, so she's trying to hide her face through the mask. But then she's like, "Oh my god, is it you?" And then she slowly and almost like very like fluidly transforms. She turns her back, and like it seemed like almost majestic in a weird way. Like, I didn't see the much costume and arm exchange. She just sort of turned into this like chador.
Yeah, I actually went back and rewatched it. Because I was like...
Yeah, it was almost like a special effect or something.
I was like, because I was taking a note and I looked up and all of a sudden she's like wearing the chador. I was like, wait, what? And I went back.
Yeah. Powerful scene. Because then you just see like she looks like a different person. Her emotional status is completely changed.
And the man goes through a transformation there too. Because up until that point, every time we see this man, he's like sweet and he's kind and he's smiling at everyone and all this stuff.
Yeah.
And then when he sees her and he sees that he's like, it confirms that his daughter's not there. And he's like, he blames this girl for convincing his daughter to come. He loses it on this girl. And he's like trying to beat this woman. It's not, first of all, don't beat your kids. Second of all, he's trying to beat somebody else's kid.
Yeah.
So all of a sudden you have this man trying to beat this little girl, essentially.
Yeah.
And the soldier has to step in and he's like, what are you doing? Don't like, you can't hit girls, all this stuff. Like, why would you hit this person? What does he say? He says something to, I think I wrote it
If you hit her, like, if you do this, she won't come home. Something to that effect.
Yeah. And I think that kind of goes back to the soldier's worry.
Right.
Because I think that in the soldier's mind, it validates why they're keeping the women there.
Right, yeah.
He's like, these are the type of people that we're trying to protect you from. In his mind, right? Like, that's his rationale. As opposed to being like, oh, maybe we should round up the men who are acting like that and detaining them instead, you know?
Yeah.
Oh, one thing we didn't point out, sorry, Kaveh, was when that soldier is first giving a play-by-play when he's watching through the grate, like above the stadium.
Yeah.
They start asking him questions, and he starts making stuff up about a retired player.
Oh, yeah. And Smoking Girl calls him out.
Yeah, she's like, wait, what?
He's not
She's
qualifying
like,
for the World Cup.
Azizi hasn't played for Iran for like a year. What are you talking about? And he's like, well, he should play for the ball because he's from the same town as it.
Mashhad.
Yeah. That was the thing I was trying to look up because I didn't realize that Azizi was Mashhadi. I thought he was from like Azerbaijan.
I don't know.
Some angry fan is going to DM me and tell me where Azizi is from.
How many angry DMs do you get?
I get enough.
Do you really?
I do.
Don't get any.
I do.
I don't get. I've never gotten a message.
That's funny. Well, because Azizi and Ali Dai were like seen as the OGs of soccer at the time.
Yeah.
But he was getting a little older, so he had retired from the team, and he was playing for club sports. So then, when finally the head soldier is like, okay, fine, stand over there and like give them play-by-play, the women are like, yeah, don't make stuff up this time.
Do you remember the chants they would say about Ali Adai when he was either injured or retired from the team?
No, what did they say?
I've always stuck with me as a young kid. He would go, Ali Adai Jai Shoma Khali.
That's brilliant. I like that.
Did you ever hear that?
No,
chant?
but that's brilliant.
Like I think he was injured for like a tournament, so he wasn't like able to play, and that was the chant. I always had that stuck in my head. Anytime someone mentions Ali Dai.
For the longest time, he held the world record for most international goals in soccer history.
Oh, really?
He was only overtaken a few years ago. Do you know who overtook him?
Ronaldo?
Yeah, Cristiano Ronaldo.
I should also translate for the non-Farsi speakers. That chant Ali Dai Jai Shoma Khali means like Ali Dai, which is his name, and it says you are missed, which essentially like we miss you, but it rhymes really nicely.
Oh, you know one thing we glossed over? Before he goes to the washroom, he's like, wait, come here. He's like, give me your poster. And he like takes the poster and you're like, what is he doing with his poster? And he like takes an elastic band from like in his sock somehow. And then he attaches it to the poster and he's like, here, put this on. She's like, what do you mean put this on? And he's like, put this over your face. She's like, what? Why? And he's like, because we don't want people to see the woman's face in the bathroom.
Yeah.
So she ends up putting on this Carry Me poster over top of her face.
Yeah.
And it's the most ridiculous thing. She's like, I can't even see it. He's like, okay, here, I'll fix it. So he takes it off and he punches eye holes like right where his eyes are and puts it back over her face and makes her walk around wearing this poster on her face.
It just goes to speak about how unconvincing any of these women's masquerade was.
Yeah.
Because each one of them gets caught right away.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I thought it would be pretty convincing just by the sheer amount of people are there. You just get lost in the crowd.
Yeah. Some of them make them in.
They make it in, but they're. I mean,
No,
yeah,
but
you're
like,
assuming you know.
remember the two that were in the other bus? They were at the back.
Yeah.
Those two for sure made it in.
I thought one of them was the other girl we see for the rest.
One
of
of them is, and then at one point, she gets pointed.
Oh, it's
like,
her friend, right?
Another guy
yeah,
is
yeah.
like, it's like you're gonna get caught immediately. You can't go in looking like this. She's like, leave me alone, whatever. She's like, he's like, you see those two people there, and they look at the bus next to theirs, and there's these two like young fans sticking their heads out the door, be like, "Yo, let's go, Iran!" And they're like putting on deep voices, and he's like, "Yeah, they're gonna be fine." She's like, "Yeah, but those are boys." He's like, "No, they're not. Those are girls. They've just done this way more than you have."
Right. Yeah.
And we never see them again.
Right. Okay. Cool. I thought one of them was the other girl who wears the chador, but maybe not. Anyways,
I don't think so. What did you think of the fact that like a lot of the people going to these matches are wearing soccer jerseys, but they're not Iranian jerseys? Like people are wearing like Germany jerseys, Italy jerseys,
Ronaldo,
Brazil,
or not Ronaldo.
yeah, Brazilian Ronaldo.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like that's probably kind of pretty true, especially for impoverished countries where people can just get the best knockoff jersey of their favorite player.
Yeah.
These people are, if they're true soccer fans, they probably like a few Iranian players, but they're probably more like Ronaldo fans.
Yeah.
Messi fans, you know?
Yeah.
So they would probably be wearing their jersey first. You know, happens.
Yeah.
In sports.
So on the way to the bathroom, the soldier's like, so why do you care so much about soccer, whatever? And she's like, oh, well, I play soccer. He's like, what, you play soccer? Like, women can't play soccer. And then he's like, no, we can. We have a whole team of women. And he's like, and guys can watch it? And she's like, no, men aren't allowed to watch it. Only women can watch it. He's like, what? What if guys want to watch it? And then he's like, what about your coach? You're telling me that your male coach can't watch it? And she's like, no, he can't. He has to stand outside the stadium and someone relays the play-by-play to him and he coaches from a distance.
Yeah.
And it's like, and this soldier, I think, is like little by little understanding how ridiculous the setup is, where it's like, look, we're putting these weird draconian laws in place, but society still needs to like continue in a modern sense. Mm-hmm. So in order to allow society to continue, there's like weird loopholes and gymnastics that you need to go through in order to still use those weird laws, right? Okay, go ahead. Okay, so then they get to the bathroom, and then Kaveh, what happens?
There's a kind of bit of a tension moment where he thinks he's lost her, so he's going from door to door trying to find which stall she's in.
Yeah.
And then he hears whispering, but then it's some old man in a wheelchair using his grandson to help him like finish going to the washroom. Like he just needs assistance.
Yeah.
That's just, there's like, those are the beats of the storyline. And he's preventing these other guys from entering the bathroom so that he can let her go. And the guys are getting upset, so it's almost starting a fight. Those are just the beats.
Yeah. I like that, the reveal of the old man in the washroom with his grandson.
Yeah.
Because you hear like whispering and he's like, oh no, what's going on in there? And he kicks the door open.
Yeah.
And the old man is like, what the hell are you doing?
And there's a weird sort of middle ground between him sticking his neck out for this woman to go to the washroom by fighting off these men who want to use the bathroom. But at the same time, the whole system is so messed up and effed up that he has to do this, but he's not doing it because he wants her. It's just a weird line to be drawn. He's like, he's respecting her honor by fighting off these men from going in who don't understand why they can't go to the bathroom anyways, but he's doing it because women have to be held to this like ridiculous standard compared to men. It's a weird dichotomy. And then so he loses her, and later on she comes back on her own, and she promised that she would. He's like, let me just go on my own and I will. Let me go on the bathroom on my own and I will come back, I promise. And when he loses her, the other soldiers chastise that soldier for losing him, and they make fun of him, and they're like, you're like a disgrace, and we're going to get in so much trouble for this. But then she walks back on her own, and the other girls are like, wow, you actually came back. Why did you come back here? And she's like, I felt bad for his cattle.
Yeah.
Because that was the soldier that had talked about how, like, he needs this thing to work out. He needs to, his mother's sick and the cattle need to be fed and all this stuff, right?
Yeah, he's like, look, I can't let you guys go. Your names have already been recorded and reported.
Yeah.
And if we let you go, we're going to get in trouble that we lost prisoners, essentially.
Yeah.
And they're going to add more time to our conscription. And I need to get back home to take care of the farm and take care of the cattle because my mom is sick and old and yada, yada, yada.
Yeah. Her reason for returning is I felt bad for his cattle. But it's also important. More importantly, she gave her word and her honor means something.
Yeah.
Which I thought was an interesting thing. Like she said she would come back, so she does.
Yeah.
There's a nice little moment of play when the one young woman who gets a glimpse of the game is drawing up on the field that they've created the lines of where everyone's position is, so she can like sort of do like a thing. And she now starts
like
using
a little reenactment.
She starts using the soldiers as extra pieces. Like, okay, you stand here. And he's like, wait, I'm standing here, but I want to be carrying me. He's like, no, you got to be. Remember?
Yeah. He's like, fine, stand over there. He's like, but I'm still carrying me. He's like, yeah, you're still carrying me.
Yeah.
And I like that he points to the like head soldier. He's like, you're Ali Dai.
Yeah.
And he like kind of gives like a half smirk.
Yeah, he likes it.
Like as the movie goes on, you see his guard come down less and less and less.
Yeah.
But then like immediately after he catches himself with his guard down, he like whips back to being really stern.
Yeah.
So good.
Yeah. The women cheering over the goal is such a great moment. And to think that it wasn't even entirely planned. It's an interesting shot he makes because the four women, even the soldiers are celebrating. Two of them hug and like one of them kisses the other guy on the cheek. And then the women are like all jumping, but then the shot is blocked by the soldier kind of getting in front of them. So like he's taking up most of the shot. So their celebration is like blocked by them. I just like that scene though a lot because it's a really uplifting moment when to see those girls so happy.
Yeah. And you can really see that the head soldier in the scene is very conflicted, right?
Yeah.
Because he's like, I guess the private.
Yeah.
It's probably like a private and like a lieutenant. The private starts kissing his lieutenant.
Yeah.
And the lieutenant is the one who's like gets angry.
Yeah.
And they're both from the same town too. They're both Mashhadi.
Right.
So he like kisses him on the cheek and then you see the women celebrating behind. I thought that was,
it
was just so great seeing them all celebrating in the same shot.
Yeah. Then there's the whole bus scene in the third act. You introduce this like young boy, this young man who, he's getting beaten up by everybody. He gets beaten up by the IRGC guy. He gets beaten up by one of the soldiers. I think Smoking Girl headbutts him in the head at one point. But he's like a shit disturber. And there's a whole thing he says about how go ahead and beat me up. Like everyone else beats me up. My father beat me up. People beat me up growing up. Like I'm good for nothing.
And he has like a lumpy head.
Yeah, he's got a weird shaped head.
Which he mentions is because of how many beatings he's received in his life.
Yeah. What do you think is the thing about including that guy this late in the story? What's what's your thoughts on why he was included? Felt like a weird choice for me creatively. Not that I disliked it necessarily. I just thought it was weird that this late in the story we're like meeting this new guy.
Like as opposed to earlier?
Like yeah, like what does he bring to the story that felt like now the story needs like this young guy?
I mean,
just to show that men could also be victims of the system.
Maybe it's a bit of that. I think also that men can be victims of like patriarchy because he's definitely a shit disturber, but he had a terrible father, right? And he mentions it.
Yeah.
And his father was absent. So I wonder if his dad is meant to be kind of like a stand-in for the regime, where like the regime is beating on men and not caring for their men. And they end up being like lost on the street, don't know what to do. So the only thing that's giving them some amount of joy is screwing around when he can.
Yeah.
Maybe, I don't know. Because he's like, this is the guy who's like just constantly bringing in contraband. That's his thing, is like, he sneaks in firecrackers and sparklers and stuff. And even after he's like thoroughly searched, later on in the van, he's just like constantly bringing out more and more sparklers and like and firecrackers. And some of them are huge.
Yeah.
And they take his lighter, but then he has like a set of matches hidden on him somewhere.
Yeah.
And he's like he still has all this like faux pride. Where he's like, look, if you arrest me, fine, but don't put me in a cell with a bunch of women. It belittles my station.
Yeah. And then they stop to get them a drink. The soldiers get out, and when they return, they put the antenna out the window. He has to hold it in place while the car is moving so they can get good reception. And now the soldiers are fully on board with helping the women with their cause. They want to hear the game too and how it ends.
Oh, here's another reason why that guy might be there, is because that guy keeps trying to like negotiate and plead with the soldiers, but the soldiers are having none of it. Like they don't entertain his pleas and his negotiation at all. But when the women plea and they negotiate, they're able to get a little bit out of the soldiers sometimes. And I think it shows that these women are actually very capable of standing up and resisting and fighting back, right?
Right, yeah.
It speaks a little bit to the compassion that some of these soldiers are able to have, because they're like, can we at least listen to the radio? And then the soldier looks at the driver and he's like, driver, can you please put the game on? And then the driver's like, the antenna doesn't work. And then he turns around and he snaps and he goes, didn't you hear that, man? Shut up and sit down. Like, he's like, still at this point, he's still trying to like help. But then when it doesn't work out, he goes back to pretending like he's a tough guy.
Yeah.
And again, he goes, hey, like to the shit disturber, he's like, hey, don't sit there. Don't sit beside women. Like, he's still insistent on this whole thing of like men and women can't sit next to each other.
Yeah.
And he asks the girl for a smoke. For the tough woman. I think she's older than the rest of them. Like, she's probably like a young adult.
Yeah.
She's probably like in her 20s, but the shit disturber kid is definitely a teenager. And he's like, can I have a smoke? And she's like, no, like, kids shouldn't smoke. She's like, no matter what you say to me, like, there's no way in hell I'm giving you a smoke. And this is the same woman who like punched him in the face earlier or headbutted him in the face earlier.
Yeah.
And he goes, how is it okay to beat kids, but it's not okay for us to smoke?
Yeah.
Which I thought was funny.
It's also funny, the irony of him saying, don't sit next to women. And then like you see the shot from behind. There's like 7 women and 8 seats back there.
Yeah. And he's like not even in the same row as her.
Yeah. He's not, there's like nowhere else for him to sit.
Where do you want him to go?
Don't sit so close to women. They're like, this room's filled with women.
Yeah. And yeah, then he puts on, no, actually before he puts on the radio, the one girl is like, can I get off the bus? And he's like, what do you mean get off the bus? It's like, pull over here so I can like talk to this woman. She's like, no, she's like so naive. She thinks that
this is my stop now. I can get off now. This is my stop. My house is right here.
Yeah. She's so naive. She thinks that they're being taken to the station so that their parents can come pick them up.
Yeah.
And he's like, no, we have to like process you. Like, what are you doing? And then everyone kind of laughs. And the tough woman kind of goes over and she like praises her. She's like, listen, like Shirzan, like lioness, like queen, like don't worry about it, like everything's gonna be okay, like we have to go through this process, don't worry, we're already here. And she's like, well, I'm really thirsty, can I at least go, like we've pulled over in front of my uncle's store, can I at least go in and get a drink? And he's like, all right, tell you what, you stay here and I'll go get you a drink. And then as he's in there going to get the drink, they notice that the TV outside of the bus and it's outside the store is like showing the game. And so we get this interesting beat that while the soldier's buying the drink, we see from inside of the bus, past the people, through the window frame of the bus, and then you see a crowd of people on the street. Then under the canopy of the store, you see the TV. So it's this really interesting point of view into the game, where you're not just seeing the game, you're seeing it through all these different perspectives, like layered perspectives, and everybody is tuned in. There's the players in the stadium, there's the people on the street, even these women that are being held on the bus are all invested in the game. And finally, when the soldier comes back in, you see that his guard is fully down. He's not only bought a drink for the one girl, he's bought drinks for everyone on the bus. And then go ahead with the radio.
Well, just that was it. I said that he sticks his head out the antenna and holds it in place for them because the antenna is like cautiously sitting there. So he has to hold it out. And at this point, the sport has brought them all together. The sport brings them all together, and even the soldiers closing their eyes and celebrating. And like saying, like, there's a countdown, like 2 minutes left, 1 minute left, 30 seconds left in the game. And then Iran wins. And for the briefest of moments, they're all just equals. They're just peers with one another. There's no hierarchy, there's no status. There's just like 9 people celebrating in a van. Which is a beautiful moment.
You're a sports fan, so you know how like with sports there's superstition, right? Like you can't jinx it, don't do this, don't do that. I love that when the one commentator goes, Ali Dai has the ball and he's going to the net, and the one woman like prematurely starts cheering and he misses and everyone blames her. They're like, it's your fault. Like, why did you do that? You jinxed it. I thought that was really good.
In hockey, you're never supposed to talk about a goalie having a shutout. If you say the word shutout, like, oh, like he stopped 25 out of 25 shots left so far. There's 5 minutes left. He's on his way of getting a shutout. It's like the famous curse. You don't talk about a goalie ever getting a shutout.
Oh, that's interesting. Until after the game. And in the celebration, I love that immediately after they win, the shit disturber lights firecrackers inside the bus.
Yeah.
And this like tough lieutenant guy like at the front of the bus who's been like tough and hard on everyone, all of a sudden he's like, take cover, and he like ducks under his seat.
Yeah.
And the girls all laugh at him.
He's like, we're being fired at. Someone's firing at us.
Yeah.
The first girl we see at this point starts crying. They ask her why she's crying. She goes, one of my friends was one of the 7 killed in the Japan-Iran game. I looked this up. Do you know about this context?
Yeah.
For the uninitiated, on the 25th of March 2005. I mean, the report was on the 25th. I think it happened a few days before that. It says at least 5 people were killed and dozens left injured outside the Azadi Stadium in Tehran after anti-government protests erupted at the end of the Iran-Japan World Cup qualifier football match. Eyewitnesses reported that the regime used special anti-riot units and hundreds of state security forces to launch an offensive on the 100,000-strong crowd after spectators started chanting anti-government slogans. So at least 5 people were killed. This film says it was 7. And the first girl that we had seen, it's arguable, it's debatable that she's not even a fan. She's kind of going in honor of a friend of hers that passed away. Like, he would have been here. He would have wanted to be here. So I'm here for him.
And I think that explains why she's also not like, she doesn't know how to play or how to sneak in.
Yeah. And then we get a whole thing of the street celebrations, which was all entirely real. The footage of the people celebrating that win was real footage.
Yeah. The baker coming in to the bus.
Yeah.
It was so good. They're like pulled over beside all these people celebrating. I mean, they're not pulled over. They just can't move because it's like there's so many cars just stopped on the street.
Yeah.
Because people got out of their cars to celebrate. They're stopped outside a bakery, and the baker comes over to the bus, and he's like, please, officer, open the door. And he's like, no, like, I can't, whatever. He's like, please, I love you. Come on. Like, just open the door. All this stuff. And then he like opens the door. And then he comes on with like, he like kisses the soldier. And then he like starts handing out like bread and like pastries to everybody. And everybody gets happy. And then he kicks him off. But then as he's kicking him off, you hear people outside being like, the soldiers have to dance. The soldiers have to dance.
Sarbaza باید برقصه.
Yeah.
Sarbaza باید برقصه.
Yeah.
Right. And I said this to my wife. We were watching it last night. I was like, it's kind of like when they say Arus bayed beraqse. The bride has to dance. But it ends with the soldiers dancing with the people. And then the comment I wrote here was, what a fucking statement.
Yeah. Yeah, that whole thing of like Sarkar bayed beraqse, I was like, that's so good. It's so good. Because they're trying to get the officer to come out, right?
Yeah.
But first the private comes out. Because the private is like a huge soccer fan. Once the private's out, the officer goes after him, but when he goes after him, he gets like roped into a dance, and then all the other women are like, "Let's do it!" And then they sneakily take the keys, uncuff the one girl, and they all go off the bus together. So good.
Yep, and it ends with the national anthem playing over footage of them celebrating.
Not the national anthem.
The Iranian national anthem.
No, that song has never been the Iranian national anthem. That the people consider that to be our national anthem, but it's not the national anthem. The official national anthem is this like chant that like praises the Islamic Republic and like the supreme leader and all this stuff.
Well, what was the national anthem before 1979?
It was an anthem that praised the king.
Oh man, that's gonna so fly into the fact of what I heard Jafar Panahi say in the interview. But okay.
Well, the people consider it to be their national anthem, and that alone is like a political statement. Because the people consider that their national anthem, but the one that the official national anthem is like propaganda. The one by the king is propaganda. But whenever it's like times of need, people use this national anthem. Even during the Iran-Iraq war, when it first started, they were getting a hard time getting people to like side with Iran, with the government, because everyone was so pissed at the government for what had just happened like the year before, right? They're like, we had a revolution. This was supposed to be good for us. But now you've like taken over. It's a dictatorship. We have no rights. And you expect us to come and like lay down our lives for you. So one of the tactics that they used to try to convince people to come fight for Iran was to make this about fighting for Iran and not for defending the Islamic Republic. So they started releasing political prisoners who were arrested during the revolution to make them go fight in the army. So all of a sudden, all these people who were like, oh, my uncle's in jail, but now he's fighting on the front lines. It forced them into a position where they had to like defend their family. And they started playing A Iran, the people's anthem, on loudspeakers across the country to try to like bolster nationalism and national pride. So the use of that in this movie, I think, was to be like, this is the voice of the people. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, despite wanting to resist the government and being persecuted and being oppressed by the government and the dictatorship, the people will prevail.
Mm-hmm.
And this song plays oftentimes when Iran has wins in soccer. This is the anthem that people play in the streets.
Okay, cool. So it's the unofficial national anthem.
Yeah.
Versus the imperial anthem and the Islamic anthem.
Yeah. This is like considered the people's anthem.
Behind the scenes in trivia. Despite some of the film being actually shot at the stadium during the game, the film shoot was actually a 39-day shoot, using sounds from the game and other production tricks to keep the real time frame of 90 seconds believable. The things that were real and really shot at the stadium were the crowds rushing to the stadium, the scene where the soldier walks up to the stadium and you see the game in the field, which is the scene you like, and the celebrations that were real in the street at the night they won. But a lot of the stuff with them in the with the wall, wall, and then it just was shot like a different location to look like it was outside the stadium over a 39-day shoot. But like her sneaking in, her actually when the first girl sneaks in and the interruption with the Basiji soldier, all that stuff was real too. Walking into the stadium,
right? Yeah.
He couldn't shoot in 35 millimeter, which was his go-to prior for every film, because he needed a more discreet camera. So he used a video camera.
Yeah, I thought so.
He said it's similar to what news reporters would use, so he was able to blend in.
Right.
Panahi asked each of the girls in the film to turn up with their own idea of how they would disguise themselves as a boy. And what we see in the film was the girls' own attempts.
That's funny. That's really cool. I like that a lot.
Panahi had 2 separate outcomes to the film depending on the turnout of the match. And he says later on in interviews he was really happy with the win and he was praying for a win.
That's awesome.
Because he wanted the story to end that way. Knowing that the film would be controversial, Panahi and his crew submitted a fake script about some young men who go to a football match to Iranian authorities in order to get permission to make the film. However, before they began shooting, the Ministry of Guidance, which issues licenses for films to be shown publicly, told Panahi in advance that because of his past films, specifically Crimson Gold, they would not issue Offside a license until he re-edited footage from Crimson Gold. Not wanting to miss the World Cup tournament, Panahi ignored the ministry and began shooting the film secretly. Panahi stated, "I use the football game as a metaphor to show the discrimination against women on a larger scale. All my movies have the topic at their center. This is what I am trying to change in Iranian society."
I love that.
Panahi cast non-professional actors for the film, and the group of young girls in the lead roles were mostly university students that Panahi found through friends who all were passionate fans of football. The film was inspired by an incident several years earlier when Panahi's daughter was refused entry to a football stadium. Panahi ended up going to the football game, the football match himself, because his daughter said, "You go ahead, I'll figure out a way." And a few minutes later, Panahi found his daughter there and said, "How did you get here?" And she goes, "There's always a way," which was the response she'd given. And then this inspired him to write the script for Offside.
That's cool. I like that.
Panahi officially listed his assistant director as the director of the film, so as not to attract the attention of the Ministry of Guidance or the disciplinary forces of Tehran. But towards the end of the film's shooting, a newspaper article about the making of the film listed Panahi as the director, and both organizations attempted to shut the film down and confiscate the footage. Only a sequence that takes place on a bus remained to be filmed, so Panahi was able to continue filming without being caught.
Oh, wow.
After the film's release, a feminist protest group in Iran called the White Scarf Girls began showing up at football matches carrying banners that read, "We don't want to be offside," using the film as a reference.
I like that. That's good. That's really good.
Yeah. This film was banned from being shown in Iran. Panahi had already set up distribution for the film all over Iran, and the film was predicted to break all box office records. 2 days after being banned and 20 days before the World Cup Championship game, unlicensed DVD copies of the film became available all over Iran, like bootleg DVDs. This film, like other films from this director, is banned in Iran.
You know what's interesting there is it's like, look, if this is the official policy, stand by it. You know what I mean?
Right, yeah.
If you think that your policy is the correct move, then you should have no issue with this movie coming out.
Right, yeah.
Right? But they know that they're in the wrong. So despite the fact that this movie isn't doing anything illegal or isn't breaking censorship, they still don't want it to get out.
Well, it's breaking rules by the fact that he had women sneak into the game in order to shoot it.
Yeah, but the whole point of the movie, you could argue from the perspective of the government that it's like, well, yeah, the soldiers were the good guys because they apprehended the women. Do you know what I mean? Like you could be like, oh no, it's a cautionary tale of why women shouldn't do this. You know what I mean?
Right.
They should feel vindicated.
Right.
They know they're in the wrong, so they won't allow it.
Sony Pictures Classics, the film's U.S. distributor, wrote a letter to the Ministry of Guidance in Iran requesting that the film be shown for at least 1 week in its home country so that they could launch a campaign to nominate the film for Best Foreign Language Film. The ministry refused. Scumbags. In the use of comedy in this film, Panahi said, "We couldn't help it. When dealing with such a surreal situation in real life, like women not being able to be on the other side of a wall to watch a football match, the situation itself becomes a bitter comedy. We, as feeling, thinking people, become hurt, so we use comedy to soothe our pain and put smiles on our faces." When the girl is entering the stadium after buying a ticket, one of the police officers grabs her hat saying, "What are you doing here?" According to Panahi, that wasn't one of their actors. It was a real policeman or security guard. The actor looked right at Panahi, wondering what she should do, and in that moment, Panahi wasn't sure either, so he told the actor to just run, and so she does. In that opening scene when they first walk in.
That's terrifying.
Yeah. Panahi was hoping not only for an Iran win, but that they could score a goal in the second half, which they did, because he felt that a goal in the first half would disrupt the emotional momentum of the story. With regards to the outcome being just how he hoped, he said it was as if the players in the game had read the script. In this regard, he said that it's as if destiny had had a hand in writing this movie, for had Iran not been qualified to enter the World Cup in the first place, there'd be no movie. Just a couple more here. But about the ending, he likes that it's a celebration, but feels it gives a mixed message through the film. He doesn't agree with nationalism in this particular way. He had mixed emotions about the national anthem being in the end, the unofficial national anthem, but felt that it was a song that doesn't talk about a system of government. No mention of the Shah, no mention of the Islamic Republic. It's a song about the people of Iran and the country that it could be. Panahi, I just noticed this in credits, so I put this in. Panahi was the stills photographer for this film.
Oh,
he
cool.
would have been about 20 or 21 years old.
That's cool.
During the World Cup games in South Africa in 2010, Tehran movie houses screened the games live to female audiences who, taking advantage of being surrounded by only women, displayed wild enthusiasm for their favorite teams, including the removal of headscarves, causing the website Iran Docht to characterize it as, quote, revenge of the stadium ban in the movie house.
The Iranian president at the time, Khatami, was there for the game.
Yeah.
He was watching from one of the box seats.
Yeah.
The movie takes place during an election year. And in fact, the game was 9 days before the first round of elections. So the game was on June 8th. The first round of elections was June 17th. And the last round of the elections was June 24th. So this was like a hot time politically in Iran. The game was played entirely in the daytime, despite the fact that in the movie you see a passage of time from day to sunset to night. They like essentially shifted the timeline of the game to happening around sunset. But in real life,
okay, how? Right. Okay, I see what you're saying.
In real life, the game actually took place in the morning.
Right. Okay.
So the celebration that you're seeing at night, that's not like immediately after the game. That's like just later that night.
It's still celebrating. Yeah. Celebrating for the night. Yeah.
I also found this article from Washington Post. At a soccer match, women kick Iran's band to the curb. So this is specifically about that match. So I'm just going to read a couple parts of the article. One of the victories scored at Azadi Stadium on Wednesday's evening was Iran's soccer triumphant over the island nation of Bahrain, an easy 1-0 win that guaranteed Iran a slot in next year's World Cup. Another sort of victory came about 90 minutes before the game when a crowd of female soccer fans, this is what you were talking about, Kaveh, pushed their way past outside the stadium, defying a rule that has banned women from soccer matches for more than a quarter century in the Islamic Republic. Also, it's worth pointing out that this stadium is called Azadi, which means freedom.
Irony.
Yeah. So this is one of the women in the group of 26. We were just insisting on our rights. We're part of no campaigns. Okay, this is from another woman. Women were allowed to come first in tens, then in hundreds. We Iranian women will get what we want. Women, like men, need entertainment. They need to express their joy. This is a good message to the next president. So her argument was that like little by little, like we'll come in tens first, then next time we'll come in like 20s and then eventually hundreds.
Yeah.
They interviewed a man at the stadium and he said, I wouldn't resist if they filled the whole stadium with women. So like even the men in the stadium were like, women should be here. Hey, even if women were like the entire stadium, like that's fine. And yeah, so this article, it might be good for people to look into it. It's really nice. It's filled with little like interviews with people. The last one I'll just share in response to the idea that if women come in, like it's bad for them because men are like swearing and they're like unseemly conduct and all this stuff. this one woman says in response, national matches have not been known to have chance as bad as club matches. But if they let us in, this will be a benefit. We'll clean them up for them.
Mm-hmm.
Which I thought was like such an awesome quote. But yeah, that's all I have.
Great. Critical reactions. Just a couple here. It was the 2006 winner of the Jury Grand Prix at the Berlinale International Film Festival. It was the 2006 nominee for the Golden Bear. So I think the Jury Grand Prix at the Berlinale Festival is the Silver Bear. All 5 women shared the 2006 winner for Best Actress at the Gijon International Film Festival, while Panahi won special prize of the Young Jury at that same festival. It won the Amnesty International Film Award in 2006 for Best Film at the Ljubljana International Film Festival. Your main man, Jonathan Rosenbaum, gave it 4 out of 4 stars.
Classic.
And the film appeared on several critics' top 10 lists of best films in 2007. Ed Gonzalez from Slant, Noel Murray from AV Club, Jay Halberman from The Village Voice, and Tasha Robinson at the AV Club. All put it in their top 10 of the year. Deeper analysis. Barn.
Yes.
Do you have some deep analysis to pull from? Because I've got quite a few gems.
I have a few. The most obvious one is that this movie is a stand-in for resistance.
Mm-hmm.
And I think unity, especially like among the people. As far as that resistance goes, not only resistance by Iranians, but especially by women and the rights of women.
Mm-hmm.
I wrote in deeper analysis that the A Iran song has never officially been the national anthem, despite being known as the people's anthem. I had actually written that down here. And I think that I actually like that he used it because of the fact that it is non-political and it is about the people of Iran. And you can really see the love that people have for Iran throughout the movie.
Yeah.
Like where they're chanting and they're celebrating, despite the fact that they all resist the government, they all love their country.
Yeah.
The first soldier that we see, the one that's taking away the first woman as they're like walking up the steps, the one who calls his girlfriend.
Yeah. Yeah.
I thought it was interesting to point out there that he's like chastising this girl for her unseemly conduct and for like breaking the rules and all this stuff.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, he's essentially using a burner phone to secretly call his girlfriend, which he can't have. He has like a secret girlfriend. And the topic of their conversation is that the night before he was sneaking around outside their house on the street, and you know that the girl's dad does not approve because he like saw him and gave him a dirty look. He mentions it. And then when the girl
asked, did your father see me sneak out? And he's terrified because he's like, your dad seemed angry.
Yeah. And then when she calls back and she starts like berating him, being like, who was that? All this stuff. He's like, no, like, don't worry about Faride. That's old news, all this stuff. So like he's clearly cheated on her before with some other woman named Faride. So it's like not only is he breaking the rules by like being with this person and sneaking around in the night with her, he's also like morally breaking all kinds of rules in a relationship by like having been not loyal, right? So, and I think it speaks to the hypocrisy of the government, where it's like, oh, do this, do that, like act properly, this, and that. But then on the flip side, it turns around and it's like breaking all these rules, not just laws, but also moral and ethical rules. And similarly, you have that line from the shithead kid who tells the tough girl, the smoker girl, like, it's not damaging to children when you hit them, but it's damaging to us if we smoke, which I think is also a low-key jab at the government that cracks down on students and physically beats them and tortures them and kills them and throws them in jail. But they're like, oh, you can't be in a soccer match. It's for your own good, because the swear words will hurt your feelings or whatever.
Yeah. I wrote down it's definitely Panahi shining a light on the hypocrisy of gender politics within Iran. Yeah. Which isn't like, with that element, there's not like, it's all surface level, like it's all right there.
Yeah.
There's, it's a slice of life about wanting to live in an impossible life too.
Yeah.
Just sort of an interesting way to look at it. I also want to mention that just a celebration of sports in general by telling you an anecdote. In 2008, I backpacked through Europe with my friend.
Mm-hmm.
Halfway through the travels, though, he could only travel for a few weeks, and I had like an extra 2 weeks to stay. So I continued traveling alone without him, and I went through Spain, and I traveled to Czech Republic, and I went through Hungary, and I was at this bar in Hungary, alone at a bar one night. And I was just like, like I hadn't really talked to anyone for 3 days. I was by myself,
Mm-hmm.
and the guy sitting next to me, I noticed he had like a hat on that had like some like Czech Republican hockey team on it logo,
Mm-hmm.
and I just ended up asking about it. I think I was a couple beers deep and feeling a little bit like, okay, I feel like talking to a stranger. And he turned out to be this Czech guy living in Hungary, but he was half Swedish. And he, all of a sudden, lo and behold, he's a Leafs fan. He's like a big Leafs fan,
Oh wow.
Maple Leafs, huge. And because he was half Swedish, he was a big Matt Sundin fan. He loved Matt Sundin. And all of a sudden, I sat there, and we ended up talking for the rest of the night, mostly about like we all of a sudden had a language to speak to each other. He had a thick Hungarian accent or Czech accent, and we talked about Phil Kessel being traded and John Ferguson being swapped for Rask and Raycroft and the playoff drought. And we spoke for hours, and instantly that like talk. Oh, you're a Maple Leafs fan? I now have hours of conversation I could talk to you. It became this unifying thing.
Mm.
But with this, me and this complete stranger that we barely spoke the same language.
Mm.
But that language of sports, we all understood.
Yeah.
And literally, I went from like, man, I don't know what else I'm going to say to him, to like 90 minutes, 2 hours unfiltered of us being like, and can you believe he traded this guy? And like, oh my God, did you see like game 7 when they did this? And I remember that moment being like, wow, sports does have this magical ability to unify through any politics,
Yeah.
identity. Like, and when you see them all celebrating, like they are overcome with emotion,
Yeah.
that they've dropped all of their guises of I'm a soldier, I'm a man, you're a woman, you're this. It's like all of that went away in the heat of excitement.
Yeah. The article that I was reading mentions how when Iran qualified in 98, after some of the qualifying matches in 98, it led to like celebrations and riots in the street. The government was apparently like dumbfounded. Like it was like they were caught with their pants down. They like did not expect the people to do that, the people to resist.
Yeah.
And it sparked not only did it spark like celebrations and riots in the street, it escalated into government protests.
Yeah.
Which during the Zan Zendegi Azadi movement, there were all these calls for boycotts by people, mostly in the diaspora. These diasporic, like prominent Iranians were like, boycott the soccer game, all this stuff, which I think was a tremendous mistake. Because if you look at the history of post-revolution Iran and how soccer matches have gone, and when like wins go and losses go and whatever, when you cheer them on, and if it results in like wins and stuff, that actually ends up contributing to unity in the country.
Mm-hmm.
Because like you said, it's another layer of a unified language where it can actually help embolden the protests.
Yeah.
So I think, just for the listeners, support your Iranian soccer teams. They're not, like, first of all, they're not even a government institution. Second of all, it's not like they're the IRGC. These are like young players who all they have to give to their country is hours of dedication and like training and playing. And I think the majority of those players also want to see a free Iran, because a lot of these people also grew up going to these matches or watching these matches, like the 98 game or the 2005 games, So just something worth considering.
The last thing I want to talk about is, and this is digging deeper, but it's based on some of the articles I was reading. There's something to be said about, in this film, transgender masquerading and passing in cinema, and how it's used as a statement to get around talking about the politics of censorship and sexuality, specifically as a way to touch on banned homoeroticism. And I was curious if there was something about it there that you had seen, because there doesn't need to be references of sexuality here. But there was like, when the smoking girl arrives, the soldier isn't even sure she's a woman, and her response is, well, do you prefer a boy or a girl?
Yeah.
In the men's room, the soldier mistakes a man with long hair as the woman, and he's like, and the man's offended and says, why don't you let me show you what a woman is? And he grabs my arm and says, Bora Baba, and he like pulls his arm away.
No, he says, why don't you let me show you what a man is?
Yeah, exactly.
Like motioning into like coming into the stall with him.
Yeah. The men are often confused about the presence of these women in dress, in these women dressed, and in a sense, they're dressed essentially in drag, right? And there's arguably like there's you can make an argument that they're stimulated by them. When Iran scores the lone goal of the game, the two soldiers are so elated they essentially hug and kiss, almost mouth to mouth. I know it's cheek to cheek.
Yeah. I noticed
like
that
too. Like even for a cheek to cheek kiss, it seemed really embraced, like a very like intimate moment. They drop the facade of authority for a moment of intimacy, is what I wrote.
Yeah.
Right? So now, Hamid Nafisi, who writes the social history of Iranian cinema, has a chapter on this, on the transgender masquerading. And he refers to a few films to state this case. One film is Baran by Majid Majidi, where an Afghan girl is dressed as a boy and attracts an Azari construction worker in Tehran, who's lured by his effeminacy and androgyny. In Mariam Shahryar's Daughters of the Sun, Dokhtaran Khorshid, a young girl named Amangol successfully passes as a man for most of the film. He shows her hair, but on the opening shot, it's her hair cut down on the floor, stating that the only permissible way to show a woman's actual hair is in its disembodied form. Like the woman's hair is cut on the floor, and that's how he's showing the hair, right? And so with a shaved head and androgenized personality, there's emphasis on close-ups on her entire face, revealing her whole head. And this direct gaze into the camera and close-ups masculinizes her, according to Nafisi. On top of that, for a third of the film, Amangol is silent. So the absence of her voice also adds to her gender indeterminacy. I'm just quoting here from the book. So like these are like serious efforts in like film to like talk about gender representation in films. And Nafisi compares this to Offside, which is using it in a bit more of a playful deployment, but it's the same motifs, right? It's about ways of talking about bigger problems in gender politics within Iran through women dressed in drag. But in a lot of ways, the mimicry of Islamic constructions of gender are still there, and they're all the same. So that was my digging deeper of reading the Nafisi quote on gender politics.
Yeah. And you can tell that like these soldiers are uncomfortable about their feelings around the girls, especially whenever it's revealed that one of them's a boy or one's a girl or whatever. Like they always have like a reaction where like, I don't know how to react.
Yeah.
Like this is outside of the script, like the script of the government. You know what I mean?
I remember talking to a friend of mine who is a gay man who was studying literature at U of T, and we talked about it, and he had made a pretty compelling case about how sports is, in a lot of ways, the gayest form of like homoeroticism. And so, because you have all these like super straight, quote unquote, straight men playing the sport where it's all about hugging, grabbing, like especially football, like slapping on the ass. You know, they spank each other on the bum, they hug. Very homophobic men who are into NFL football or whatever. But then, like, if their team gets a touchdown, they're gonna hug and grab. And it's like, in a lot of ways, you can interpret the language around male affection to one another in sports as like homoeroticism. But it's masked under like, well, no, this isn't like gay because we're like celebrating football or whatever it is, like NFL. But there is like a language that can be talked about around how sports is pretty gay, and that's a good thing. Best scene. What's your favorite scene?
My number one scene is when Iran wins and they're all dancing in the bus, and then the soldiers break there too, and like everyone's celebrating together. I think that was the best scene.
Yeah. I think that's my favorite scene too, but I also wanted to write down the sit down talk when the film slows down for a bit, when Smoking Girl talks to the head soldier guy, and that's the whole thing about talking about, oh, so it's my well, he's talking about the Tabriz theater screen.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, women. I really like that whole dialogue, and the way it's shot is she kneels down so she's behind the gate and he's in front of the gate. So the way she's talking to him is like she's in prison, like she's behind prison bars.
Yeah.
Even though it's just a gate that's dividing them, it looks like she's in prison.
Yeah.
So I like the way it was shot too. So I'll give it to that.
Yeah, my runner-up for best scene was when the soldier goes looking for soccer girl when she runs away from the bathroom. Mostly because of the visuals of that scene where he like walks into the stadium and it's revealed and you see the entire stadium.
Yeah.
That's my runner-up.
Yeah.
I just thought it was powerful visually.
Least favorite scene. I didn't really have one, but if I had to pick one, maybe when she cries on the bus about the 5 dead in Japan. I don't even think it should have been excluded. I just kind of thought all of a sudden this film is taking this severe right-hand pivot in this moment and then doesn't do anything with it. It just kind of, and mentions that 5 people died. 7 people died in this thing. All right, back to the celebration.
Yeah.
It was a bit distracting, but again.
Yeah, that's fair. Now that you mention it, I might switch mine to that.
Well, okay, what did you have?
Originally, I was like, I couldn't think of a single scene that I was like, oh, I like this less than this scene. So I shifted my view on it, and I was like, well, what could be a scene that you could take out of the movie and the movie would be the same movie?
Yeah.
Like what scene could you delete? If let's say you're like, oh, this is 2 minutes over, we need to trim 2 minutes, or we need to shave off 60 seconds from the movie somewhere, I would probably say it's the scene where she's buying the ticket.
Yeah.
You could, like, I could buy that she's already bought the ticket. Like, I don't need that scene.
Yeah.
For the reasons that we talked about, the deeper analysis of it, I can see why you kind of need that scene. So I do like it and I appreciate it.
Yeah.
I'm only picking that scene because I'm like, if there was a scene in the movie that you could remove and everything about the movie would stay the same, it's that one. But now that you bring up that moment about where she mentions how her friend died, thing is, like, that's not a whole scene. That's just like a moment within probably my favorite scene. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So if I'm talking about removing an entire scene, it's probably the one where she's like buying the ticket outside the stadium.
Yeah. Damn, that's poetry. I'll go first.
Okay, go ahead.
For me, it was when Smoker Girl kneels down. It's the same, as I said, one of my favorite scenes. It's she sits down to talk with the soldier, and her exact line is, "Why?" Like, she's like, "Can I ask you a question? I want to chit chat with you. Why can't women go in there and sit with men?"
آره میتونم سوالم بپرسم.
چه سوالی؟
میگم چرا تو استادیوم زنها حق ندارن بیان کنار مردا بشینن فوتبال ببینن؟
And he says, "Why are you so stubborn? Women can't sit with men in a stadium." He goes, "Then why could Japanese women watch the Japan-Iran game here?"
آخ خانم چرا شما نمیفهم اصلا نمیشه زنم برن تو استادیوم کنار مردان غریبه بشینه.
پس چرا تو بازی ژاپن که تو همین استادیوم هم بود زن ژاپنی اومدن نشستن فوتبال دیدن؟
And he says they were Japanese. And he goes, so my problem is that I was born in Iran. If I were born in Japan, I could watch soccer?
فرق داره اونا ژاپنی بود.
آها یعنی مشکل من اینه که تو ایران به دنیا اومدم؟ یعنی اگه تو ژاپن به دنیا اومده بودم الان میتونستم فوتبال ببینم؟
I feel like she expertly in the scenes kind of unfurls the stem of hypocrisy within the Iranian culture, within the Iranian government. And I really like it because it's like, oh, it's not even my femininity. It's not the fact that I'm a girl, apparently. It's because I'm an Iranian girl that I have to suffer more.
Yeah.
And I like that. So that's my favorite scene.
She's so good at...
she's a great character.
Yeah. And she's so good at being able to dismantle their arguments.
Yeah. Really good.
My favorite quote is in the same scene by the same girl, but it's a different quote. It's two parts of what she says. I'm just going to bundle them together. But she says to the guy, she's pleading with him. She's like, she has such a way of like blending flattery with praise, with like being assertive, being just, making valid arguments. Like, she's so good at blending all those different attributes. So she says, "You beautiful soul, why don't you understand? Let us just see the game like from here.
Yeah.
And I'll be indebted to you. I'll do anything. I'll die for you, for your mom, for your cattle. I'll even milk your family cow for you. I'll take care of your mom."
Yeah.
قربون شکلت برم چرا نمیفهمم؟ تو بذار من بازی رو ببینم. من خودم مخلص تو و مادر تو و مزرعت و فک و فامیلا و گوسفنداتم هستم. اصلا گاو گوسفنداتو خودم میچرونم. به مادرت هم خودم میرسم. اصلا کنیز مادرت میشم خوبه؟
And the soldier gets really angry and he's like, "All this for a game?" And she's like, "It's like I'm sitting beside the ocean and you won't let me fish. At least let me eat tuna from a can."
لب دریام. ماهی نمیتونم بخورم. مثل تونه ماهی بخورم حداقل.
And I was like, "Oh, this is..."
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. That's great. Is that in the same scene? Is it the same moment?
Yeah, it's the same scene.
Nice.
It's like broken up into two parts, but
Yeah. That's really good.
it encapsulates the same quote. It just kind of, it's a nice little cap off.
Favorite performance? Mine's a no-brainer. I really like the Smoker Girl. Her character is so good, and it just made me like the character and her performance the most.
Yeah.
She was the most compelling and convincing to me. Smoker Girl.
Yeah, mine's a two-way tie between her and the officer, like the lieutenant, I guess. The machete one.
The guy who gives them the most crap?
Yeah, because he does such a good job of showing how conflicted his character is.
Yeah.
Of going from being like distraught to angry to understanding to empathetic to sad to happy. Like, he like switches between all those emotions so well.
Yeah.
And it actually makes you be very empathetic towards their oppressors. They win him over, and because they win him over, it wins the audience over to him.
Yeah. Nitpicks, hot takes, what aged poorly? Mine is I just have one, and it's quite simple. I read that he'd gone non-professional actors, friends of his daughter, or people that he knew from university who were soccer fans. And I think for both, and I'm not going to call any one individual out, but I think between the soldiers and the women, the young women, I thought there was quite a few, more than one pretty bad performance. I think based on the construct of how the film was being made, in the rush style that it was and shot on location and non-professional actors with some time to rehearse, but maybe not that much. I think some of their performances are a little flat, like not convincing. Some of them, not all of them, one or two, and I just don't want to call any of them specifically out because they're not professional actors, anyways.
Yeah, that's fair.
You know what I mean? It's one thing if we're like being like, oh, Ghost Shift of Farahani's performance in this wasn't as good as whatever, but I don't know. These are people who might actually potentially listen to the podcast too, and I don't want to be like that one would pick it.
Yeah.
So I just think that it's a nitpick, but I just think some of them are non-professional actors, and it was a little obvious.
Yeah, I think for me, it's probably the moment that you mentioned with the sudden turn to my friend was one of the 7 who died.
Yeah,
It just felt very sudden, and it didn't really like pay off, and it just felt like it was such an abrupt turn, and then it abruptly turns back. Like it kind of felt like tonal whiplash there.
Yeah.
We also never. This is a little bit of a nitpick, but I can forgive it. We never find out what happens to that guy's daughter.
I think she just probably went to the game and had a good time.
Yeah, that's my assumption as well.
Yeah.
I don't need to see it resolved. It's just like, oh, I guess it would have been nice. I don't really care. This is like a nitpick. Like, I don't actually care that much.
Yeah, I mean, I guess maybe you have a point considering the fact the film starts on that guy.
Yeah.
Like, there is a certain emphasis on...
Like, I thought it would end on her or something.
Yeah.
The only other what aged poorly thing that I would mention is is honestly the technical restrictions on it. Like, the fact that it was shot on digital video. Like, it just doesn't visually look as good. And they try to mask it as best as they can with, like, a very stylized color correction. Like the whole movie has this like really warm hue over it. But yeah, again, these are like nitpicks. Like I really, really, really like this movie.
Yeah.
And then the final frame of the movie, I really liked. The final frame of the movie is it's from behind. It's the first girl that we see in the movie. It's the first woman that we're introduced to. We end on her, and the movie ends from behind her. As she's gotten off the bus, a sparkler in each hand, her hands raised high, and you see all these Iranians celebrating in front of her. I thought that imagery was very powerful. Double feature lineup?
Yeah. Why don't you go first?
For me, I think it's... have you heard of a movie called Lagan?
Lagan?
Lagan, yeah. It's...
No.
I think it's technically a co-production between England and India. But it is a Bollywood film, and it's a cricket film where this poor community in India resists British imperialism through a cricket match. I drew parallels between the resistance by this Indian village to the British occupation and the resistance by these women to the Iranian government. One through playing cricket and one through observing soccer. And I think it also like both movies speak to the love that people have for one's nation, not nationalism, but I think definitely patriotism and unity of one's people. So yeah, I think those two would be a good double feature lineup. The only thing is Lagan is like 4 hours long.
Oh, that'd be a long.
Yeah, thankfully this movie is only an hour and a half. But if it was like if I was doing like maybe a series, like a weekend series, then I would probably put these together.
I have. A lot of people might say Fever Pitch or something like Bend It Like Beckham, but no, I go with the Iran Job, which I don't know if you've seen yet, Farhan, but we'll do this for a future episode.
Yeah, we'll do it.
The story of a Kevin Shepard, a young black American from Florida who doesn't make the NBA, so ends up having to play competitive basketball in Iran. And it's a documentary, I should say. It's all nonfiction. The camera crew follows him for about a year in his life in Shiraz as he plays for AS Shiraz, and just a sports movie that deals with the politics. You know, the women are allowed to be in the court in the stadium, but women on one side, men on the other side. It deals with the gender politics of that, but through the eyes of an outsider, which I think would just be an interesting balance, because that film was also, though there's heavy moments, it's actually quite uplifting because this guy's experiencing Iran and falling in love with Iran as an outsider. And so this would be a good double feature. 2 sports movies in one sitting.
That's solid.
The Iran Job. Check it out. Can this be a modern Hollywood remake? Your favorite category? I say no. Actually, not really. There's no point in making it because the film's recent enough. And if you made a Hollywood remake, you probably wouldn't be sneaking into a stadium. And I think a lot of the fact that this is shot real is adding to the charm. So you can't faking it would be a waste of time and resources.
I think if one day there's a different regime or like a change in laws or whatever in Iran, it would be interesting to see this movie get remade in Iran as a period piece with like modern sensibilities, or maybe with like not even sensibilities, but just with like unrestricted access to what the story needs to tell the story.
Totally. Yeah, like doing it the way Argo does a movie like Argo.
Yeah.
It's like do like an actual like biopic version, like a little bit higher budget.
Yeah.
Do the I get that.
Yeah,
that would be cool.
But I would still, like I usually say with this category, I would want it to be made by Iranians. Hollywood can fund it, but let Iranians make it.
Yeah. Final thoughts and grades. I like this movie a lot. I've never actually flat out yet this episode said how I really feel about it, other than pointing things out. I don't think I loved it as much as you did. And in terms of the Panahi pantheon of films, I don't think it's that quite high. I think it's like mid-range.
Interesting.
So I give this somewhere between a B++ or A minus. It'd be teetering that line. Let's say for the brave choices it had to make and actually it being a risky movie, I'll say like I'll put up to an A minus. So it's in the A's, but it's in the lower half of the A's.
Wow.
It's a good, really good film. I don't think it scratches the itch of like saying too much more. Like I feel like we've said everything there is to be said about this film. It's not one that like needs to stay with you like a good book and you can unpack it years later and find new meanings and new things. It's just kind of all surface level, which is good. It's still very good. Just doesn't scratch that itch I look for in cinema.
Right. Okay, fair enough. I'm giving the movie an A+.
Yeah, cool.
For all the reasons we've already talked about. Like you mentioned, I don't think it's like tremendously deep. We've already talked about what the movie is a stand-in for, like the allegories, the allegorical stand-in of the film itself. But I really liked it, and I really liked seeing the complexity of some of these characters. And I think it's understated how much Panahi is able to dive into the soldiers, which was not something that I expected, and it wasn't something that I remembered.
Yeah.
And seeing that these women, despite the fact that they're being held here by the men, they're like winning them over, like winning over these oppressors to their side, and then together the men and the women are all celebrating at the end of the movie, I thought was just really beautiful. And having the A Iran song play at the very end,
that stuff was great.
Yeah, it actually my eyes welled up a little bit, so I was like, oh, this is beautiful. And yeah, I really, 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 really liked it. So yeah, A+ for me.
That's great.
Which means that our Cinemarex average score for this film is an A-.
Yeah, A- between A- and A.
Yeah, A-.
Offside, a spirited film that explores gender politics, the comedy, intelligence, and a variety of interesting characters, mixing fiction and documentary so deftly we can't tell which is which. Shot largely on location at Azadi Stadium during an actual match, breaking the fourth wall of fiction, fading into documentary. To some extent, it's a happier and less artsy version of his previous films like Crimson Gold and The Circle, which also deals with female oppression and concludes inside a police van. But here, Panahi treats the guards who must enforce the law, as well as the girls, as comic victims. A film about breaking rules and breaking forms, to celebrate not only the team you're a fan of, but celebrating the life you know you deserve to live. Forget Hercules. Forget Superman. Offside features some of the bravest characters you'll ever see depicted on screen. Farhan, thank you very much for joining me today on my show. You know how I feel? Just kidding. Thank you for all your efforts. You know how I feel?
Unfortunately. Thank you, Kaveh.
To all of our listeners, thank you. Before we leave you off, that's it from us. But we had an opportunity to talk to my cousin Morvarid, who actually was inspired by this movie and snuck into, I think, definitely at least one, but I think multiple soccer matches in Iran doing this very thing. So we're going to end off with a short interview with her about her experiences and what she thinks of the movie. And also a little fun fact that I didn't tell you until right now, Farhan, just to get your reaction live. Her father, Morvarid Sadinejad, writes the music theme for our show.
That's so great. That's awesome.
So
that's really cool.
To all of our listeners, thank you. We leave you with this interview now. Be Omid Didar.
Bye.
Hi, thanks for joining us.
Hi, Kaveh. Thanks for having me.
Why don't you start by introducing yourself?
Sure. I'm Morvarid Sadinejad, and I'm Kava's cousin. I'm your cousin.
Also, your father records the music for our show.
That's true.
Have you actually got any response from him about has he heard it and been like, has he said anything?
I've actually played one episode for him to see what he thinks. He liked it.
All right, cool. Good.
Yeah.
He wasn't like, he didn't revoke the right to use his song?
He didn't.
Okay,
No,
that's good.
he already gave the right away to him
Okay.
to Kava. So
So you know that this episode we've done is on Offside, and I thought about a good opportunity would be to interview you just because you have a little bit of a personal connection to your experience with that. So why don't you just begin with when was the first time you saw it and your memories of your relationship with that movie?
sure. I don't exactly remember when it was. I was in middle school, high school. So probably around 2007, 8. I don't know which year the movie came out exactly even.
2006.
Okay. So yeah, it was pretty new when I watched it. And I really, really liked it because it was showing all the discrimination that I was feeling it in that age exactly.
And that's because you are a soccer fan, right? Like you grew up a soccer fan?
Funny enough, not really, not as much as the girls in Offside were. Soccer is popular in Iran. Everyone kind of watches it at some point in their lives, but I wasn't a soccer fan or a soccer player necessarily. I just got really excited by the idea, and I liked the national team, so I've always wanted to see one of their games at least.
So from the way I remember you explained it to me was you were you inspired to do this because you'd seen the movie and you thought it was a good idea?
Yeah, exactly. I watched the movie and I was like, I need to do this too.
So can you just describe, while you're watching the movie, kind of give us a little bit of a play-by-play of what was going through your mind? Was it while you were watching the movie? Was it like immediately after, a few weeks later? Like, what was the process of you deciding that you wanted to do this?
I was in high school and I was excited by the idea. I don't really like I'm not gonna lie, I don't remember exactly how, if I got it during the movie or like which scene made me want to do it, but then I just looked at the girls and the stress in their faces, just the unfairness of the situation. And I was kind of like a tomboy at that age. When I was in high school, I was like dressing up like a boy. I had my hair short. Everyone was like judging me for that. It wasn't very common, at least when I was in high school. But yeah, so I was like, I feel like I was just fighting for that equal rights that was taken away from me. And I was like, well, you're not letting me in this stadium. I'm going to go. Like, these girls tried to go and you caught them and you won't catch me.
So was it your idea? Did you go with a group of friends or did you go alone?
So the first time, I actually have a very cool dad, you know.
Yeah.
I went with my dad. I was like 16 or something. It was 2009. It was Iran playing against Saudi Arabia. And I wanted to go, and he said, okay, let's go. He actually used to take me to the men's hair salon too with himself because I had a short haircut always. So yeah, so we went together. I was still in high school, so it was not very obvious that I'm a girl, I'd say. I still tried to like tie myself, like my breasts and everything, because they check you upon entrance. Like,
Oh, like they did a pat down?
yeah.
Not to check if you were a boy or a girl.
No, just to check if you don't have anything dangerous with you.
Right.
Before you went in, did you cut I know you said that your hair was short. Did you cut it even shorter, or did you like wear a hat? Like, what was...
It was really short already.
Okay.
So I have a photo I can show you later. But no, it was already very short. So like, it was actually machine shaved short.
Really?
Yeah. So I didn't cut my hair or did anything. And I already had a lot of like boys' outfits.
Okay.
So that was basically just me going with my dad. And they couldn't say I'm a girl.
Were you at all worried though that you might get like what if let's say they were to figure it out, however they would figure it out, what was the thought that would go to your mind of what will happen to you if they find out?
Or to your dad?
I wasn't very worried because my dad was with me actually.
Mhm.
And I knew he would be able to like just somehow protect me or do something or figure it out. And the fact that he was like with me made me more comfortable. And I was very confident at that time. I was very sure that nothing's gonna happen. No one's gonna know. How would they know? Like, people already mistake me for boys all the time. However, the second time was very different because I went again
We'll get to that second time in a second. I'm really curious. But one of the things I want to know before we get there was this something that you saw more and more young women were doing, or were you kind of like an isolated incident, or did you get the sense that more people, your friends and stuff, were trying this now because of the film or before the film?
I didn't have friends that were soccer fans or really like were as much of a resistive against like anything that's forced to them. Maybe I'm sure there were people doing it. That's probably how like Jafar Panahi got the idea for the movie. But I don't know of anyone, or I didn't see anyone when I went the 2 times that I went there.
No, that's really cool. I just didn't know if it was something that you just even heard through the grapevine that other people were also doing or something. So you kind of just went on your own and decided to do it.
Yeah, no, I don't know anyone.
What about the later times that you went? Did you go with friends or did you just go alone?
So no, yeah, the next time I went with friends. I was in university, I think like 2nd year or 3rd year. We had this family friend. I grew up with him. He's like he was like a brother to me. So I went with, he still is, sorry. So I went with him, and some of the guys from university were also joining us. That time I had very long hair. So I tied it and I wore a wig. I bought a wig for like just going to the soccer game. And I made a fake beard all out of my like haircut.
No, you didn't.
Wow.
I did. And I put glasses and I drew like more hair in my eyebrows and everything.
Oh my God.
I actually didn't clean my eyebrows for like 2 weeks prior to that, just to make sure that I'm like looking hairier than I am.
I was gonna ask, but I was like, maybe that's an insensitive question.
No, it's not. It's a very normal question. But I remember the second time, I was a like grown up lady, so I had my breast very tight. I had like 2 bandages tied really tight, and I was layering. Like I was wearing 3 layers just to make it like look more normal. But then when we went in, I just told my friend after like 30 minutes, I was like, yo, I can't breathe. I feel like I need to go to the washroom and just release these bandages. It's too tight. But yeah, that's the one thing I remember. Funny other thing was one of the friends that was joining us there didn't know me before, but he knew that a girl is also coming with this group. He came in, said hi to me, said hi to my friend, and we started chatting. I just introduced myself as Mehrdad. And
awesome.
So we kept talking, and he was like, so by the way, where's the girl? And I was like, I'm the girl.
Really good.
Yeah, so that was the one funny thing that happened.
So wait, so were you the only girl doing this in your group of guy friends?
Yeah.
There wasn't any other girls? Okay.
I think it was like 4 or 5 other guys, but me. One of them is now my husband.
Oh,
you went with Jamshi June.
Yeah, but we weren't dating at the time.
is this how you met, or did you know each other already?
No, we already knew each other through university, but yeah, he also happened to join that group.
Oh, cool. Okay.
Yeah.
Have you ever gone to a soccer game with another woman who was also disguised?
No.
Or you've only ever done it with other guys?
Yeah, I've only done it with other guys. I feel like it would have been less suspicious if it's one girl and a bunch of guys. If like anything goes wrong with multiple girls, others are also in trouble.
Right.
Yeah, I totally agree. Do you remember what game that was? The other game you went to?
Oh yeah, that was a Iran-Lebanon game. I think that was 2013 or 14. The first one I remember we lost to Saudi Arabia terribly, and the second one we won. So at least I have both experiences.
Yeah, and it feels like it's way more worth it after they win too.
For sure, yeah.
When was the last time you saw the movie? What were your thoughts on the film? Do you, like, just as like a fan of movies, did you like the movie? Did you have issues with it? What's your like mini review of the film?
I actually liked it. I rewatched it a couple of years ago again, and maybe one other time as well. I don't remember exactly. It's one of my favorite movies for sure. I think I liked that it was somehow showing how everyone's like not really necessarily happy with what's happening, even like the soldier, but also the part that was shown that the girls, some of them were fine from like their family's support side, but some of them were also having the same trouble with their family. The one girl I remember that was wearing the chador after the neighbor guy or whoever family guy found out about her, and then she she was so ashamed and so like scared that she carried her chador with her to the stadium dressed up as a boy. That was
Yeah.
that was such a weird moment that was captured for me. I was like, see, this women are not only fighting their regime and not only doing social disobedience, they're standing up against their families, which is very brave. I always had my family's support. I went there first time with my dad. Imagine how terrifying it could be for like her, for example.
Yeah. And arguably too, it's almost like fighting herself, right? Like fighting like an internal guilt for that character because she's carrying the chador with her, right?
Yeah, there's a really interesting point about how some of the families, it's like a double-edged sword in terms of the threat is coming externally and internally at home. And it's a really good perspective you brought up.
That's because I've seen it a lot. That's something you would definitely see growing in Iran with like all the limitations that families put on their specifically on their daughters. And all like, yeah.
I really like the aspect that it shows how there's different degrees of how the women handle these men. And there's some that were more scared, like the youngest girl cries right away from the beginning. She doesn't speak that much during the movie, but then the oldest one, the one that she's called the smoking girl, she like doesn't take any shit from them and she keeps yelling at them back. I really love that character a lot.
Exactly. That's, I think when I did it the first time, that's the one I related to most because I was like, oh, this is the badass girl I want to be. This is who I am. So if anything happens, I'm not going to be scared. I don't give a shit. Like she didn't.
When you went, were there young men there doing their sarbazi?
There are always young men doing their sarbazi everywhere.
But I mean, like at the stadium?
Yeah, if there is police, there are soldiers too.
Oh.
There can be. Yeah, so like soldiers, you have the option as a soldier to join the army or the police forces. I mean, not that it's an option.
Right.
It's a random assignment. But also the police forces have soldiers that they use. So like
this is separate
if the
from
stadium
Basiji.
has police, this is separate from Basiji. Yeah.
Yeah, I made the mistake of not knowing which one. Like the three guards that are mostly guarding them, they're just police officers, right? They're not.
Well, they're the conscripted soldiers.
They're soldiers. Yeah. They're police forces soldiers.
Yeah.
So they're literally like
they're just on sarbazi.
Lowest level of duty people that police has.
They might even officially be anti-Basiji and anti-Islam entirely, and just be there because they have to be.
They might be, and the one thing is, so usually like the lowest degree of like soldiers, they call it soldier zero, Sarba Sifr in Iran.
That's so funny.
Is the ones that they don't even have education, so they couldn't go to university. And that's how they ended up doing their military service, like in their 18 year, like when they became like legally an adult.
Right.
So they're usually like, they're very normal people, usually not educated enough, didn't have a choice. Like the guy was like, oh, my sheeps are like they need me in the village. The sheeps are gonna die without me.
Yeah, he says that about his horse.
Oh, horse. Yeah, sorry.
No, you're right. Sheep too. He mentioned sheep, cow, horse. Like he mentions it all.
Yeah.
The other thing I was going to ask you was one thing that I kept thinking about, especially after Women Life Freedom Movement, was how 2006 Iran is so different from 2024 Iran, and how people who live there. You have told me this, but other people too. It was different in terms of leniency. It was easier. There was waves of acceptance, even amongst the most right wing. So, do you feel that if someone were to try this now in 2024, it'd be more of a threat and more terrifying what the consequences could be, given the protests and stuff?
That's a hard question considering I haven't been there for like a while now. But I feel like yes or no, maybe, because that time it was less common of these things to happen. The consequence of it was bigger.
Right. Okay.
Maybe. But right now, maybe it's more of a like you see girls without hijab every day in the streets, although they're like putting more pressure and arrests and all kinds of things that's happening. So maybe it's like more normal now.
I was just going to leave off with one final thing, but Farn, do you have anything else on your list?
I would love to know if you were to give this a grade. Like, let's say you're a teacher and you're giving this a grade 0 to 100. What would you give the movie?
I've seen it like 2-3 years ago last time.
Right.
From a social aspect, and the conversations and the writing and then what I remember and the storyline and like how it happens, I would definitely give it a high score. However, like I don't know, 90 maybe, but I don't really remember all the artistic details or the cinematography or any of those things because I feel like the social aspect of it is what's very bold in my mind, and I definitely give that a high score.
Okay, great. So on our scale, you'd essentially give that like an A then.
I think so. Yeah.
Cool.
Ready for the last hard question? You can take your time to think about this. We've looked at our metrics and we see that we have listeners from Iran and Turkey and outside that region. So as someone who has lived a life there, has fought up against the Islamic government, has stood your ground and made a way to live your life there but aren't there anymore, do you have any messages for the young women in Iran that might be listening to this podcast? Anything of hope that you want to say? Because you might, strangers who don't know you might be listening to this.
Honestly, I feel like the women of Iran right now are the ones who should give us the message of hope, not the other way around. They're the ones that are being super brave and just really, really amazing, fighting against like the tyranny of the regime. I don't think I'm at the position to give them any message other than thanking them for all that they're going through and all that they're doing.
That's awesome.
That's great.
You hear that, Orange County? I'm just joking.
Yeah. No, and one of the things we've noticed is that our second most views in the world is Turkey, which we think is weird, and we think it's because they're using VPN or something. In,
That's possible.
Iran.
There's also a bunch of other like random little countries around Iran that similarly we get like listeners from, and we're like, oh, those are probably VPN.
Thank you so much, Maury, for joining us.
Thank you so much, guys. This was really fun.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Music for Cinema Rex was written and performed by Morvarid Sadinejad.